Hey, so I'm just going to go check out today's protest that's supposedly by Trafalgar Square, Parliament Square.
We don't love this country, you live. We love this country.
Bless, man.
You love this country. And you're a few house.
The streets are a little bit quieter in the centre. Strangely enough, around Borough Market today in Shoreditch was very busy. The central London very quiet, but that's because I think most people have stayed away because they know that the cops are disproportionately policing a certain group. A group that sadly has a haircut similar to myself, but that is not me. However, let's go see what's happening.
Live pictures that we're getting in at the moment in central London from Trafalgar Square. You can see the crowds there moving along with the police. These are helicopter live images coming into us at the moment. A lot of people are moving.
As I get closer to the square, I start to hear the sound of wasted taxpayers' money, unnecessary police helicopters. What was ridiculous about last week, there were no cops in riot gear. However, what I'm hearing, first bang I've just heard there, what I'm hearing, because supposedly people who are on the right of the political spectrum are out today, all the cops are wearing riot gear today. They're the people that are trying to protect statues, I assume.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Roads must fall is their demand. Take it down.
This is the question for £1 million.
Support tearing down the statue. Yeah. Why are you Why are you against?
For £1 million. It's the wrong answer.
The centuries of capitalism were held to have produced nothing of any value. One could not learn history from architecture any more than one could learn it from books. Statues, inscriptions, memorial stones, the names of streets, anything that might throw light upon the past had been systematically altered.
Statues help us glimpse into our past, even the ugly bits. The toppling of statues is enriching, not erasing history, and it has thrilled my heart.
Well, let's see what's happening. Sadly, the brain-dead thugs will probably be reacting to the police. So far, what I've seen on Twitter as I'm walking down here, that's what they've done so far. When I refer to brain-dead thugs, I refer to people on both sides of the argument. I believe there are brain-dead thugs on the side who are wanting to protect statues, British monuments, and I believe there are thugs on the side that have been desecrating statues. What I noticed the day after I filmed this, there was some broken glass and broken windows in Leicester Square, exactly where this group are heading to. Well, it looks like I've just caught the front end of this protest here. A lot of aggression, a lot of FUs, a lot of... At this stage, I'm just trying to watch my back. I'm holding a camera right now. It might be a very small camera, but there's a very high chance that someone whizzing past on a bike could easily snatch it. Hence, I'm just trying to be careful, keeping the camera low down. I don't know who's going to come up behind me. The reality is that most of these protesters are good people, but there's opportunists, and those opportunists could easily just snatch your camera out of your hands, and the last thing I want to do right now is lose a camera. riot police are out here. Crazy. I think this is what the MSN wants. The MSN is trying to divide people, and there's a lot of, uncivilized. This chap's probably a really nice bloke, but that's one hell of a look he gives me there. I honestly hope he meant well. Anyway, peace to him. Aggression seems silly. You could feel the tension in the air. There was just a general vibe of hostility, not towards myself, but just in the air. A lot of these people were out for blood, and if they came across anyone that was vaguely similar to the EDL, they weren't going to have a nice encounter. That was the impression I got, at least. Atmosphere's tense. I'm not sure if they're going around that way because they want to try and do a loop round. There was a remarkable difference in the level of policing this week compared to last week, and it makes you wonder why. So the previous weeks, the BBC reported general peaceful protests, and yet dozens and dozens of police officers were badly injured last week. This week, the so-called football lads came down to London to basically protect the statues and monuments because they witnessed the police not protecting them the previous week. However, not all of the football lads are the greatest bunch of chaps. And I say that, I genuinely say that, and I'll probably get a dislike for that from anyone that's watching this that is a football lad. But I know in the football lads groups, there are violent thugs, and there are drunk thugs, and there are drunk idiots. And you do this country no service at all when you bring violence to a protest. And when I say violence, there was violence on both sides, a considerable amount of violence. The lads that came down from various parts of London, because I did speak to these people, at some stage or another had attacked the police. Earlier in the day, around 1 o'clock, violence had broken out between the so-called football contingent and British police officers. Now, I get the fact that the British police weren't doing their jobs last week, and we can blame Commissioner Dick for that, but that gives you no right to go attacking our brave men and women who are police officers, and massively unacceptable. But there was a huge difference in policing. They're clearly moving protesters away from each other. They're trying to break up protesters, almost behaving like sheepdogs, sending protesters off in different directions, fragmenting the protest. So, police cordon pushing everyone back, just walk around them. I'm getting stuck inside that, no need. I think the Metropolitan Police did a reasonable job this week because they separated the groups. Now, I'm not a fan of this separation, but it seemed to work this week. The scary thing is, they're heading into the centre. There's a lot more businesses, shops that will be at risk if they move into the centre. The people at the front of that protest look like they wanted to smash things up. That's a little bit disconcerting, I think. I know I'm pointing out the obvious, but this is Trafalgar Square. Just behind me, line of riot police in front of me, riot police heading towards Downing Street. The square has been cordoned off. I guess they didn't want groups meeting in the square, but this is insane. This is what the mainstream media have been pushing for. They're creating this division.
This is CNN, the most trusted name in news.
I want to be a neurosurgeon when I grow up. Can I operate on racist brains to change them?
You have to be cured.
It was horrible.
Can I operate on racist brains to change them?
The next day, brothers, and I had truly done my best morning and afternoon to play it their way and sit like a horror show cooperative malchick in the chair of torture.
It's total insanity, and people are buying into this crap. And when I say crap, you hopefully have been watching my other material to know that I don't stand with either group involved here. I stand with the veterans who stand there peacefully guarding the statues, I stand with the Metropolitan Police who do a good job. I don't stand with individuals on both sides that are wanting to create division, cause violence, and just crap all over the good people of this country. Gone from square being empty a moment ago to suddenly now entering the square. I stated it in my previous video, it's a sad thing that George Floyd died. The officers involved in that are being brought to justice. They're already in jail, they're going to trial, they will go to prison, and yet in London, which is over 4,000 miles away from Minnesota, these individuals are tearing up the streets of London and generally giving an up yours to brave men who fought and died for this country. Every time you desecrate a war memorial or a monument of you are basically insulting not only them, but the people that died next to them and also the people that came after them. And I think that's insulting. And hence the reason there's division right now, because of the splinter groups involved on both sides who resort to violence. It's only going to potentially, if this isn't resolved soon, it can only get worse. And it will be a sorry state of affairs if the cohesive friendships amongst the races in England suddenly broke down because of something that happened 4,000 miles away in Minnesota. A movement that has been financed by the Open Society Foundation. I witnessed a rabble of overweight, tattooed thugs hurling insults, cans, bottles at the police. And I also witnessed a rabble of Black Lives Matter protesters attacking overweight, tattooed thugs. And there was violence on both sides. And these police officers cost the British taxpayer a considerable amount of money. The average police officer, in my mind, is underpaid. But each police officer working today will be paid overtime, will probably be paid an excess amount of money to do a job that really doesn't need to be doing. Do you remember the days when people could turn up and hold a piece of card and there would be no desecrating of monuments and there would be no desecrating of buildings and there would be no risk of people punching and kicking each other, potentially to death? Thankfully, no tension in the air right now. It's a positive. Things seem to be peaceful. Like the previous weekend, violence seemed to only break out intermittently, sporadically really. But it still did break out. There's a massive difference between last week and this week. This week, the police have had the sense to come out and do the right thing. Statues are covered in metal still, shops are boarded up, but it's hard to tell which shops weren't already boarded up. But this is metal. Hopefully Nelson's okay. So if you notice this week, this part of Whitehall is empty. And it's a good thing because it means these statues there's nothing happening to these statues. The police seem to be cordoning off the streets. I don't even think I'm supposed to be here. I'm going to try and get through, but I don't think I'll be able to get through. I think what they've done, they knew there was a right of centre protest, well, people wanting to protect the statues in Parliament Square, and they knew that Black Lives Matter was coming potentially from Hyde Park or somewhere, so they've separated the two groups. As long as they're policing, it's okay. The Open Societies Foundation has donated over 100 million to Black Lives Matter. pushing this idea of Marxism, pushing this idea that Lenin had back in 1903. The Bolsheviks, he would be very proud of what he's witnessing right now, because this is exactly what is happening. It's a history repeating itself. And the mainstream media, which is all for the downfall of society, is pushing this agenda of dividing society. Social Marxism can be brought in, and we can have this Hunger Games society where we're split and controlled, and we've got to stop infighting, because by infighting, those that control the mainstream media get what they want. Since 2016, they've been on the run. The mainstream media and the globalists have had casualties. Trump won. He's not the greatest president. He's a bit of an idiot sometimes. But the thing is, he wasn't their man. Brexit wasn't their idea. We had them on the run. And now we're being sucked up to believe that there's this division in society. By allowing the division to take place, you allow these people to gain power again.
So as expected, they cut off the route to Downing Street, the route to Parliament Square, splitting up the protesters. If only they'd done this last week, but instead Sadiq Khan was encouraging people to desecrate monuments. Thankfully, that one's been left alone, but we shall see later on Twitter to see if there has been any destruction.
And then this happened as I was walking towards Parliament Square. I didn't film this is from RT, but this is unnecessary. This is just thugs fighting thugs. The guy got knocked out. You're twice his size, I'm not surprised. But why? What's the point of that? So I couldn't get to this part, so I walk around the back to here, which is just next to the new Scotland Yard. And it seems my camera's been slightly smudged. But it was clever policing, because they had cut everyone off because of the sparks of violence. And strangely enough, just as I'd walked away from Trafalgar Square, apparently this happened. So it seemed everywhere I went, I was missing the sparks of violence. I'm happy for that, but I'm sad that this violence even has to take place. This is not normal London. But thank God the police were there. Just there is a memorial for the soldiers that died in the Korean War. Fine soldiers, brave men, and I'm super glad that no desecration happened to any of these monuments, because straight ahead of us, if you continue heading straight, is New Scotland Yard, and I would have been shocked, given the number of police officers in this vicinity, that any of these fine monuments would be desecrated by more than just a pigeon crapping on one's head, as you saw there. If you do get a chance actually to walk along the Thames and check out the New Scotland Yard, along this whole area there's some fascinating monuments. I think this is the soldiers that died in Afghanistan. I'm super glad that there was no disrespect by graffitiing, saying BLM, because what does that achieve? It achieves nothing. All you do is just you anger people, and it's unnecessary graffiti. And you wonder why there's so many police around Westminster. It's because they only have to walk across the road. This is New Scotland Yard. A new location from where Old Scotland Yard was. This is where the Met and Commissioner Dick hang out. And they plot to see what should be policed. Now, I know there's a lot of hard-working police officers in the London Metropolitan. A lot of fine men, a lot of fine women. But I think it's a shame who is in charge, because the person in charge is clearly someone that's more keen on virtue signalling and more keen on political correctness than actually policing the streets of London. In my opinion, they should take the Mayor Giuliani approach, which is where Giuliani, when he was mayor of New York, it was a zero tolerance policy. You know, someone's causing problems, they're arrested. If someone's graffitiing, they're arrested. And that's the Metropolitan Police's eternal flame there. Nice little flame. Very close to the Soviet flames that you would come across in the old Soviet Union. You remember, if you watch my videos from Belarus and Ukraine and Moldova and Transnistria, there's eternal flames lit by the Russian gas. I'm not sure how much gas is flowing into the streets of London. I mean, it's probably coming from the North Sea, I would imagine. But here I am, effectively heading up towards Big Ben. Big Ben you can just see up ahead. Still under scaffolding, still being refurbished. The dongs never rang out on the 31st of January when Brexit was announced. The European Eurocrats still would like, very much so, that the United Kingdom stays part of the EU. Hopefully they don't get their way. I know that will get me a dislike on this video if someone's listened to this far. But here's me literally just trying to get past these police officers, but it turns out, because they're fragmenting the crowd, they're trying to stop anyone joining Parliament Square because of what you just saw earlier. Things are kicking off in Trafalgar Square and Parliament Square, and they just simply don't want any more people joining the proceedings, even though it wasn't actually that busy today.
Where are you trying to get to, mate?
Other side. I want to go through basically Pimlico.
Best bet, unfortunately.
I just come that way. Conversation. Yeah.
Go.
I know you're doing a good job of it.
Best thing to do, go down there, go over Hungerford Bridge to Waterloo Station, and you can get the tube from Waterloo.
I don't want to get the tube.
Well, unfortunately. Or your best, if you want to walk it, go over the bridge, walk down the South Bank, to Lambeth Bridge, then you can walk over Lambeth Bridge.
Okay, so how many people are you going Parliament Square?
I really don't know, I'm afraid. Circle's being dealing on this side.
So if I just walk across that bridge over there? I just saw some cyclists.
They won't let you over the bridge, that's all on lockdown as well. Alright?
But I saw cyclists go past.
Well, they're all being stopped now, sir. Look, they're all being turned back.
So it's 30 seconds too late.
Alright, that'll be your best bet. Is to walk over the bridge, down the South Bank, to Vauxhall, go that way.
Here's the thing, this technique's been deployed by the Metropolitan Police more than once. I've probably been going to protests in London, not as a protester, but as a bystander, as an observer for at least 20 years, maybe longer actually, which shows my age. But one of the techniques which they don't use all the time is this sort of divide and conquer, and that's basically you split the streets up by basically fragmenting the crowds. And if you fragment the crowds by blocking off certain streets, it means you can't have the crowd building in numbers, but it also means that while they've blocked this street, they have the ability to send in officers into the trouble points and also fragment those crowds, effectively diluting the crowd. That's at least their objective anyway.
So basically we've been stopped from heading over towards Parliament Square. So anyone that wants to go through, if you want to go west, you can't. They're suggesting people go all the way to Waterloo to get a tube if they want to go that way, but why would you want to get a tube on a day like today, especially during lockdown? I think this is unnecessary.
I then spent the next 25 minutes having a very heated debate with a very friendly black man and also a very aggressive black man. And I must say, if you two are ever watching this video, do reach out, because despite our differences, I did enjoy that debate. Police, as predicted, did move away, and they moved away simply for the fact that they started dispersing people from Parliament Square, which I got to witness here. And this is where the police are pushing people out of Parliament Square, as you can see from the police vans pushing people up. And people are being moved over Westminster Bridge, and obviously up ahead of us is the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben covered in scaffolding. And the police are basically fragmenting the crowd. This is a technique used by the Metropolitan Police. It has to be said, a very successful technique, but incredibly frustrating technique if you're part of the protest, because your protest is basically destroyed. There's no way your protest can carry on. It's like, imagine the white ball smashing into the triangle of balls on a pool table. The Metropolitan Police are acting as the white ball. They smash into the triangle and they push all the balls out into the various pockets. And their hope is, by pocketing all the balls, the people go home. That's the hope anyway.
So it turns out I missed most of it because I couldn't get into the square, but now they're pushing people out.
There is a negative to the pool analogy, because by the Metropolitan Police fragmenting the crowd, they pushed very unhappy people into places that really shouldn't have been witnessing these protests. Turns out the protesters who were pushed out of Trafalgar Square, who I initially saw walking up Tottenham Court Road, were then pushed down over Waterloo Bridge and towards Waterloo. Once they got to Waterloo, it was literally every man and his dog attacking anyone that was provocative in their direction, and savagery literally broke out. And this is what I saw on Twitter. London's never had the racial tensions that the United States has had, and the UK has certainly never had those racial tensions that the United States has had. Yes, we had the Brixton riots many decades ago, but that was similar to this, and that was similar to what we had in 2011 when we had the riots in London. It was people being spurred on by this feeling that they are ignored by the wider society, and the reality is that's simply not true. If you look at who comprises of London and all the ethnic minorities that make up London, the majority of them, and it is the majority, because if you look at the Sri Lankans, you look at the Indians, you look at the Japanese, you look at the Chinese that live in London, they're actually earning more than the white people. This is the crazy thing. We have to stop this narrative where everyone's being hard done by, because there is no disproportionate violence to people being detained by the police in the UK. 163 people died in police custody in the last 10 years in the UK. Only 13 of those were black. Is that disproportionate? Obviously 163 people, and I've already said this in my previous video, should never have died. But you have to realise that some of those people died of alcohol poisoning, some of those people died of GBH because they were arrested and they'd been involved in severe violence, similar to the violence that you just saw there, arrested and then died, possibly in the police van, and some in police custody, before a medic could save them. We've got to stop emulating what's happening in the United States. The UK is not the same. We shouldn't be covering up the statues, and there's the Winston Churchill statue up ahead.
We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
And so I say, yes, you're right, Black Lives Matter. I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe.
That shouldn't be covered up. There's no reason anyone needs to guard that statue, or any statue, because we should live in a society where monuments are protected, where people can walk peacefully down the street, which on the whole, I basically appeal to people thinking about visiting London. On the whole, when this isn't going on, central London is a very safe place. West London is a very safe place. Most of North and South London and East is very safe. You have the pockets in the peripherals that, to be honest, you have these sinkhole estates that you wouldn't want to go to after dark. But the reality is London is incredibly safe. Despite having a terrible mayor, that is Sadiq Khan, despite him concentrating on him being virtuous, despite him telling the world how much he dislikes Donald Trump, and ignoring the sinkhole estates where there is drug crime and there is knife crime, the majority of London is very safe. And we need to realise this, and we need to stop this racial division.
If you don't like this country, you leave.
Yes.
If you don't love this country, you leave. You love this country.
God bless, man.
You love this country. Many of you have lost your family for the peace. If you don't love this country, you leave. If you don't love this country, leave this country. That's a simple message. All life matters. All life. You have veterans here, activists. All life matters. All life matters. What we are saying, if you don't love this country, leave.
Yes, leave.
And he has a point, but the thing is, if you hear that from me, then I'm labelled. But if you hear that from him, these social justice warriors on the left can't say a thing, because guess what? It's coming from him as opposed to me. A little bit ridiculous, don't you think? But he has a massive point. All of these people that really dislike the country, it's a very, very free world. They can go elsewhere. So it's interesting. The Nelson Mandela's been cordoned off. Gandhi's been cordoned off. And Churchill's been cordoned off. It was a little bit of a conflict here earlier, and it's unfortunate because there's idiots on both sides. It seems by 6 o'clock, everything's settled down. I think it was a curfew actually. So now everything's kind of back to normal. Waste of money once again. There's no need to protect, no need for people to even police this under normal circumstances. The world has gone crazy. The mainstream media are manipulating you into believing this division. We're creating huge division because of this. So apparently the conflict is now in Trafalgar Square. So the square that was empty is now where the conflict is. It seems everywhere I go. So basically, there's problems in Trafalgar Square right now. There's no real problems here. The problem is I can't now get back to Trafalgar Square without having to go all the way around. The horses have come through that way. You've got the people on the we've got their riot gear, helmets in their hands, ready to sort of helmet up should they be needed. And I think they're basically just trying to get people out of Trafalgar Square because it's kicking off. I hope it isn't because of anything more than just idiots. So being asked to move from the square. I don't see why. Basically, it would be a shame if they're trying to bring violent people to the square. That would be a shame. As we get moved out of the square and the clouds turn grey, I think it's appropriate to realise it's time to go home. But sadly, there are people causing problems in Trafalgar Square, there are people causing problems in Parliament Square. I just think it's really sad that this division is being caused by the mainstream media, caused by the London mayor, being caused by the NGOs channeling their money into creating this division. It's very sad because the UK used to be a very cohesive place, and now we have to cordon off our statues, and that's a shame. Very windy. Anyway, thanks for watching, I appreciate it.